All right, peace, peace. This your man, Just Be Real, coming to you live once again. And this is the continuation on the AIDS virus, right? And I'm going to read this article in its entirety. All right, I'm going to post it in my description box. And even in this book right here, entitled, this is Behold a Pale Horse by William Cooper. And on page 445, he even has it in this book. It says, in 1969, 3 years before the World Health Organization request, the United States Defense Department requested and got $10 million to make the AIDS virus in labs. And as political, it says, as a political ethnic weapon, to be used mainly against blacks. They made this virus for black people. So this is a message for you politicians. It says the government requested $10 million to make the AIDS virus in labs as a political ethnic weapon to be used against black people. Now, let's read this. Let's read this. So I went over this in parts 1 and parts 2 with Dr. Robert Strecker. I believe this man is dead now. All right? I'm going to read some of this stuff. If I have to make a part 2, I will. So this man was a trained pathologist and holds a PhD in pharmacology. And in '83, Dr. Strecker and his brother Ted Strecker is dead. Ted Strecker was an attorney, and they were preparing a proposal for the Health Maintenance Organization, or HMO, for the Security Pacific Bank of California, and needed to know the long-term financial effects of ensuring the treatment of AIDS patients. Okay, now let's drop down here. So he says that in about '83, my brother and I began working on an insurance plan for a large bank in Southern California. And in doing that, in '83, nobody knew what AIDS was going to cost us. So we decided that in writing an insurance plan for about 30,000 people, we would determine the cost of AIDS for ourselves. And that led us into this whole problem of not only AIDS, but what has come out about it. And basically, what came out about the inquiry was the fact that we concluded the AIDS virus was a man-made phenomenon. It's not something that came out of Africa, out of the jungles of Africa, or some monkey virus, or from some monkey biting some African on his ass. And then bam, 100,000 cases of AIDS come out of Africa. Why is everything going back to Africa? Okay? Let's keep on going. It goes to say that this virus was invented in a laboratory. Matter of fact, let's do this. We're going to pause right there, and let's go back into this book, Behold a Pale Horse. Now check this out. Look what he said in this book right here. One second. Okay. Give me 1 second. I'm about to come back to it. I had it highlighted, but I'll come back to it. Okay, I'm going to have to come back to it. Because I got a lot to read. I have a lot to read on this site. Okay, here it is. So on page 168, it says that the African continent was infected via smallpox vaccine in 1977. The vaccine was administered by the World Health Organization, the WHO. According to Dr. Robert Strecker, it says, quote, without a cure, the entire black population of Africa will be dead within 15 years. The U.S. population was infected in 1978 with the hepatitis B vaccine. Dr. Wolf Simunis, the ex-roommate of Pope John Paul II, was the mastermind behind the November 1978 to October 79 to March 80 to October 88 until October 81 experimental hepatitis B vaccine trials conducted by the Centers for Disease Control in New York, San Francisco, and 4 other American cities. He loosed the plague of AIDS upon the American people. The gay population was infected. The ads for participants specifically asked for promiscuous homosexual male volunteers. Whatever causes AIDS was in the vaccine. The vaccine was manufactured and bottled in Phoenix, Arizona. Okay? The order was given by the policy committee of the Bilderberg Group based in Switzerland. Other measures were also ordered. You see that? Let's keep on going. So it says here that, okay. So it says here that the virus is made in a laboratory, right? And it says they've been working on producing it for 30 to 40 years. So what? So it says so you would sort of have to ask yourself, when AIDS occurred, after they have been writing about it for such a long period of time, and they have been trying to make it for such a long period of time, why is no one running around shouting and saying, hey, you know, we finally did what they were attempting to do? We succeeded in producing a virus that destroys the immune system and kills people. Okay, so let's drop down here. And it says that, I talked about this last time, that they were doing experiments on black people in the Tuskegee Airmen, the Tuskegee people in the 30s and 40s, and black men were being recruited for the experiment. Okay, so you can read about that, and it says that there's also an entire history of experimentation on people with chemical agents, not only biological agents, but chemical agents, particularly in some experimental project called MK Ultra and some others where the United States government officials were actually introducing chemicals into men. For instance, in San Francisco, the most unusual that has been documented that is public is where prostitutes were given LSD that they were given to their johns or sexual partners, and then the CIA were actually sitting behind one-way mirrors, and they were filming what was happening to these men who had been drugged with LSD from prostitutes. Of interest in the cases, the prostitutes were arrested. Then the CIA was actually intervening to see that they were released. Okay? So you can read about this. And it goes on to say that, what about prediction? We talk about prediction. In other words, in our review of the literature, we spent about 6 years in the library reading, digging out this stuff. And what we ran across in 1975 in Tokyo at an international assembly of leukemia experts was a guy named Jay Clemenson. Clemenson is still alive. This is an interesting story. In 75, Jay Clemenson, who was a world-renowned epidemiologist, was speaking before a group like this in Tokyo, all of whom were cancer and leukemia experts, got up and said the following, quote, "We are in fact establishing conditions for a pandemic spread of an oncogenic virus varying on the scale of influenza of 1918. Now, what is he saying? What he is saying is, get ready, world, because scientists are making viruses that will cause leukemia or cancer. So if you have family members, if you have people in your family who has died of cancer, they made this virus. They made this. It says, because scientists are making viruses that will cause leukemia or cancer, and that will spread as readily like the flu, and will kill more people than the influenza pandemic of 1918, which killed 1/5 to 1/3 of the world population. That's exactly what has occurred today. That is exactly what has occurred. The existence of AIDS and its close relative is exactly the appearance of viruses that cause leukemia or cancer that are spread in a sense like the flu. You see that? All these diseases are man-made. And who made these diseases? The white man. And they black folk, because they just told you that they made the AIDS virus for black people. Let's keep on going. It says here that the existence of AIDS, okay, it says, let's see here. Let's drop down here. And he says here that, he says, actually, I'm just finding it interesting because if you want to learn about AIDS, the people that you talk to are the people that you want to talk to are veterinarians. Veterinarians are what? What are veterinarians? Veterinarians are people who deal with animals. Right? Right? Veterinarians. Vets. Veterinarians administration. And veterinarians are people who are, let's see, let's read, let's look it up. Veterinarians it says of or relating to veterinary medicine, concerned or connected with the medical or surgical treatment of animals, especially domestic animals. Let's keep on going. So it says here that that's why it was interesting when it was mentioned that the public health official here had talked about cattle. What are cattle? Cows. These diseases came from cattle and sheep. They didn't come from monkeys in Africa. The story gets more preposterous. The story gets more preposterous. As we get into it. But the reason that you know that they didn't come from monkeys is because the company that AIDS keeps, not because of the AIDS virus itself. If there were only AIDS virus, you probably couldn't make any conclusion because it could have appeared out of the blue, so to speak. Things do, in a sense, evolve or generate. But the interesting part is that if you look at the history of the theory of evolution and spontaneous generation, the U.S. National Institute of Health has spent billions of dollars telling us that spontaneous generation does not exist. Okay, so let's keep on going. And it says here that, so now they're trying to figure out what is the evolution of AIDS, what is the beginning of AIDS? How was it put together? That's how we get into this topic and looking at where did this thing come from. And when you look at the nature of AIDS, the AIDS virus, what you would discover is something very interesting. The genes of the AIDS virus does not exist in primates or man. If you took the genetic material of monkeys, chimpanzees, human beings, and rearranged it, you cannot make AIDS. The genes of the AIDS virus exist in two other viruses called retroviruses of cattle and sheep. One of them is named bovine leukemia virus of cattle, which is a T cell leukemia producing agent, just like Clemson was talking about. The other is Vista virus, a brain-rotting virus of sheep that has managed to infect about 75% of sheep on the western ranges of the United States and the rest of the world. In the 50s, there was an outbreak of bovine leukemia virus in Europe. A guy named Mamaro and a whole bunch of other retrovirologists in Europe were looking at cattle and said, quote, you know, there's something strange going on with these cattle. They have a strange kind of disease. And they knew it was some kind of viral problem, but they couldn't get a control over it. What they did was the exact thing that was mentioned. They established a program actually called Call and Kill. So only the animals they concluded were infected were called out and exterminated. All across Europe, they had a plan of call and kill of all animals that were infected, and as a result, they slaughtered hundreds of thousands of animals. This led to the development of disease-free herds. Let's drop down here, and it says that now in the 70s, early 70s and 60s, they did an interesting experiment here in the U.S. in Ames, Iowa, conducted by a guy named Vandermoden and a girl named Miller. So Miller and Vandermoden took chimpanzees and injected them with a virus named bovine leukemia virus, because the question was, quote, is this virus dangerous for human beings? And what happened was that these chimpanzees produced antibodies against that virus. So what was their automatic conclusion? The conclusion was that because these animals made antibodies against this virus represented no threat to the animal. So therefore, there was no program of containment of bovine leukemia virus in the United States. As a result, about 15% of cattle or cows in this country are now infected with bovine leukemia virus. If you look at the death certificates in the areas of massive milk producing states like Wisconsin, Iowa, and Nebraska, there is a virtual explosion of T-cell leukemia among dairy farmers. Let's keep on going. Go back to 69, a testimony before the Church Committee in Congress. The DOD representative requested $10 million to produce new viruses that could selectively destroy the immune system. In 72, a group of virologists writing in the Bulletin of the World Health Organization said this, quote, let's make a virus that will selectively destroy the T-cell system of man. They went further and said, quote, also, let's make a virus that will selectively destroy the B-cell system. And they wrote down in volume 7 and volume 47, page 257, 1972 Bulletin of the World Health Organization, and said why they wanted to make these agents. They said, quote, we can use these agents to produce certain kinds of cancers and leukemias. It will allow us to make these diseases. It will allow us to make what we call dissolving diseases, which is part 2 of that same request for production. So in 1972, a group of virologists said, let's make AIDS. In 1975, Clemson says that it's coming. And in 1980, it's here, and everybody's wandering around scratching their damn head saying, hey man, where all this shit come from? Well, really, to me, it seems quite simple. The virus was produced in a laboratory by the recombination, or the mixing, or the melting together, or the mating of two viruses, one named bovine leukemia virus of cattle, and the other named Vista virus of sheep. the disease in humans that are presently running, there's a whole lot more. There's a whole lot more going on out there besides AIDS. There is an infectious T-cell leukemia virus named HTLV1, which is human T-cell leukemia virus 1, which is a infectious agent. It looks like bovine leukemia virus. It causes the same kind of disease in humans as it does in cattle. And this virus is probably far more infectious than the AIDS virus. See that? So they took the virus of a sheep and the virus of a cattle, diseases, and mixed them and made the virus. And dumped that shit on the continent of Africa. Now niggas running around getting sick from out of nowhere. If you want to talk about biblical stories, and don't say shit about Moses having no damn AIDS or cancer. Where was all these diseases at in slavery? Ask yourself, how do you take a virus of a cattle and sheep and make it into a virus of humans? In 71 and 72, the scientists of the world got very interested in this group of viruses called retroviruses. Retro stands for a presence in an enzyme called reverse transcriptase. Now, that doesn't mean anything to us, but what does it really mean? Here is a virus which is in a RNA form. What does RNA stand for? RNA is ribonucleic acid. Ribonucleic acid, a nucleic acid present in all living cells. Its principal role is to act as a messenger carrying instructions from DNA for controlling the synthesis of proteins. Although in some viruses, RNA rather than DNA carries the genetic information. Go back and watch my videos on Forbidden Archaeology Part 1 and Part 2. Let's keep on going. I'm going to post this in my description box. It says here that, okay. So our genes is DNA, right? So they messed around with genes, with DNA. Okay, so let's keep on going. Let's drop down here. And it says here that in 72, when they was fucking around with this thing in the United States National Institute of Health, a guy named Stuart Erickson published a paper, and he was working with a mouse retrovirus. What Erickson discovered was this: he put that mouse retrovirus into a human tissue culture plate, and then he came back after it was packaged. In other words, he grew there several times. It grew there several times, and what he discovered was that this mouse retrovirus was no longer grow in mice. It would now grow most efficiently in human tissue. So he had discovered how to make a cross-species jump. In other words, how do you change the virus of one species into the virus of another species? This is how you take bovine leukemia virus of cattle and change it into HTLV1 human tissue for a sufficient period of time, and now you have human T-cell leukemia virus. If you take bovine business virus, the original AIDS virus, and grow that virus into human tissue, you now have a human AIDS virus. One of the things we didn't understand initially, or at least it wasn't clear to us in 83 and 84, was, were these people intentionally deceiving people, the American public, you and I, or were they just stupid? He says, I now don't ever believe that they were stupid. We asked a question of several virologists, and one of the questions was, quote, could you take bovine leukemia virus of cattle and business virus of sheep and make an AIDS-like agent? In 83 and 84, we called up one of the world's leading retrovirologists, one of the leaders in our AIDS industry and said, quote, "Can you do that kind of experiment? Could you make an AIDS-like agent? This is typical." He said, "Who wants to know?" And I said, "I want to know. I'm Robert Strecker." So he said, "Well, look deep." He says, "Well, looking deep into the darkest part of Africa, you might find a virus similar to the AIDS. But you could never, ever do that kind of experiment." He said, now they talking to this dude. They said they didn't believe him. So he said, so we went to the library and we put into the midline search, and anybody can do this. If you don't believe this is possible, simply go to your local library and ask for a midline search. He says, we thought what we call a virus, if it was live AIDS, and we knew that it had bovine and visiting characteristics. So we said, quote, "Well, give us all the papers on Visna bovine virus, and they give us all the papers on bovine Visna virus from 1950 to date, to the present date." That was from 1950 to 1984. And he says, and whammo, out they came. It says, out came papers on a virus named bovine Visna virus, which has the same exact shape as the AIDS virus. It has the same exact molecular weight. It had the same exact genetic structure in its sense. It had the same magnesium dependency, which is relatively unique to this class of agents. It had the same exact capability of killing T cells selectively, and yet, in the cumulative knowledge of the world's AIDS expert, the virus didn't exist. Now that's a lie. He said that's a lie. It's bullshit. It says the same technique that you make human T cell leukemia virus from bovine leukemia virus is how you make human AIDS virus from bovine Visna virus. It says, and you take that virus and grow it into human tissue. In 1978, a paper was published in which they were growing bovine Visna virus in human tissue. And of course, that's how you adopt that virus in human. And that paper in 1978, which was published in the Journal of General Virology, for anybody who's interested, said, quote, "It is possible, might it be, could it be that this virus is capable of producing either malignancy or a slow virus disease of humans?" It says, so there's prediction, there's precedence, there's production. What's left? It says that in 1972, we produced a group of viruses. It says, It says, so what do you think really happened? What we think was in 1972, the United States National Health Institution was funded millions of dollars to prove once and for all that the viruses cause cancer. That viruses cause cancer, of which, of course, they didn't pre-72. And the reason that we know that is because cancer was never infectious before, but it is now. In 1972, we produced a group of viruses that would cause cancer basically in the laboratories around the world, and then, in our opinion, these viruses were probably tested. We think they were tested in large populations of Africa, which explains how you get 300 million Africans probably infected today. Let's drop down here. It says here that the epidemic in Africa could not have started from a single point infection. In other words, the number infected are so great, there had to have been a mass inculation at some point in the mid-70s. What we think really happened was a group of scientists went to Africa and actually tested these agents in Africa. It says now, how did they appear in the United States? If you look at AIDS in the United States, AIDS didn't come here as a black heterosexual disease. How did AIDS appear here? It appeared in a very select group, young white male homosexuals between the ages of 20 and 40 who live in select cities, New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago, and St. Louis. In 78, it appeared in New York, and in 80, it in San Francisco. It says that now that epidemiology is exactly the same as the United States hepatitis B vaccine study. You see that? Let's keep on going. This is messed up, man. This is sad. This is sad. But so now they're trying to figure out, do they have a cure for this thing? They said they got it. It says, so what's the solution? The solution is an ever more interesting problem, which we stumbled into in all sorts of rambling about reading. And what we discovered was that, in our opinion, the disease can be fixed by a pulse electromagnetic wave, which led us into the theory of electromagnetic medicine, which led us to the theory of Raymond Roy Wright. The story of Wright is even more startling because what if Wright did is correct, and I believe that then anybody who died of a cancer infectious disease since 1920 died needlessly. It says Wright's theory is this. It's very simple in principle. Just as with a crystal glass, if you radiate it with the right audio tone, what Wright said was that viruses and bacteria and cancers could be killed uniquely at a correctly pulsed electromagnetic radiation. And we believe this is true. In fact, there's an overwhelming amount of evidence that shows that it's true. Okay? So, I'm going to post this in my description box. I done read the whole damn article. Okay? And it's more than this in the book. So he says, the main thing he wants you to remember is the AIDS virus is not a happenstance occurrence of nature. This virus was produced specifically upon request and is designed to kill people. This didn't happen just by some accident. This has been worked on for about 30 to 40 years. See that? What happens in the future is going to be determined by what we do from this point on, in a sense. You have got to become involved politically. You got to become involved ethically, and that requires education of yourself and everyone around you. And you just can't be apathetic and sit at home on your couch and watch the boob tube, because you're going to end up just like a boob. So, I've just pretty much read this entire article, and now you know how the AIDS virus is made. It's made in laboratory, and it was made from two animals, sheep and cattle, bovine leukemia and Vishna virus. They took those two viruses and mixed them, and that's how you got the AIDS virus. So, I'm gonna post in my description box. You can read it for yourself. It's even documented in this book right here. Behold a pale horse on page 445. Read it again. In 1969, 3 years before the World Health Organization, or the WHO, request, the United States Defense Department requested and got $10 million to make the AIDS virus in labs as a political/ethnic weapon to be used mainly against blacks. The feasibility program in labs in 74 through 79. The feasibility program and labs were to have been completed by 74 to 75. The virus between 74 to 79. the World Health Organization started to inject AIDS-laced smallpox vaccine into over 100 million Africans. Population reduction in 1977, and over 2,000 young white male homosexual Trojan horse in 78 with the hepatitis B vaccine through the Centers for Disease Control New York Blood Center. And now the AIDS virus is on the streets in the drugs. And this book's entitled Behold the Pale Horse. This is for you politicians. Politicians are your people who's involved in politics. Government. Congress. Government. Alright, so with that being said, peace. Click subscribe. One more thing before I get out of here. Check this out. Now they got some shit out. Hebrews and Negro Awards. Just look at this dumb shit. Hebrews and Negroes Awards. We got bigger problems. There's some goddamn Hebrews and Negroes Awards. These niggas passing out awards now. Look at this stupid shit. Look at this. Look at this. Watch this. These niggas got an award ceremony now. Award ceremony. Look at this.
Yeah. Shalom, everybody, and welcome to the Wolf Judah 2019 Hebrew Award Ceremony. Now presenting our very own Israelite nominees in action. Zion Lex.
You see this trash? This shit ain't no different than the Sonetta TV Awards. This shit is hand in hand. Get the fuck out of here, man. This garbage. This is trash, man. This is bullshit. We got bigger problems from goddamn Hebrew Israelite Awards. It's bullshit. These niggas taking your money. They can be taking his money and trying to figure out a way to cure the AIDS disease. They go about some goddamn Hebrew Israelite awards, passing out awards, because they talking about some chosen people. Shit is a goddamn shame, man. Shit is no different than the Sonetta. This Hebrew Awards shit is no different than the Sonetta Awards. They just did an awards thing. The Amin Y Squad Sonetta TV Awards. This shit. It's no different. All right, man. Let me. Oh man. I don't want to get myself worked up. This is bullshit. All right. With that being said, peace. See you on the next one.